Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Development Control and Regulatory Board on Thursday, 13th of July. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing on the County Council website after the meeting. Please turn your microphones on before speaking and off when you are finished to ensure that you are heard on the webcast. We'll start with the agenda then. Item number 1 is minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of June 2017, pages 3 to 6. Would someone like to move those? Moved by David, seconded by Bill and Chris. Thank you. Item 2 is question time. We've received no questions, so there won't be any asked. Item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. We haven't any of those either. Item number 4, to advise any items the Chairman has decided to take. We haven't. There's none for that either. No. Declarations of interest, items on the agenda. Anything anybody like to? That's no then, Ewan. Yep. Also under that item, declaration of interest, it is noted that all members who are also members of parish, town and district councils or liaison committees will have personal interest in those applications, which will relate to areas covered by those authorities. Item number 6, presentation of petitions. We haven't received any petitions. Item number 7 is application to remove a tree with a tree preservation order on it. Mr. Shaw, will you deal with that, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. This is an application that's been submitted by Mr. Martin of 53 Rowcliffe Road, Newtown, Linford, to fell an oak tree that is located on the highway verge. Just bear with me. And the reason for his application is that the tree is restricting his visibility to the right when exiting his driveway onto Rowcliffe Road, requiring him to pull forward onto the carriageway to be able to see oncoming vehicles. He states that since recently occupying the property, he has experienced a number of near misses. He is concerned that he and his family are at risk of being involved in a road traffic accident as a result of the restricted visibility. The planning officer for Charnwood Borough Council objects to the felling of the oak tree and states that the reason given for felling related to visibility on the highway, not the condition of the tree, and the tree may benefit from crown works to remove dead wood. There'll be no comments from Newtown Linford Parish Council and no comments from the local residents. The Highways and Transport Commissioning Service have stated that the oak tree is on the highway verge and within the visibility splay for any vehicle exiting onto the highway, and that they would recommend removal of the tree on the grounds of highway safety. The recommendation is that consent is granted to fell the oak tree on the highway verge, and the reasons for this recommendation, and I'll expand these reasons a bit more, that the oak is restricting highway visibility for the applicant, that is resulting in the applicant having a significant loss of enjoyment of his property. On the balance of probabilities, the loss of enjoyment of the applicant is greater than the minor loss of amenity that would occur should the oak tree be removed.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. We have no speakers on this item. So I'd like to call on Mrs. Taylor, who's the ward or division member first, if you'd like to. Any comments, Mrs. Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. Normally I would be against trees being removed that have been there a long time, but I do note that they are saying that the tree's only got a life expectancy of 10 years or more. So on that grounds, with the highway safety issue, I have no objections to the tree being removed.
That's okay. Yes, I agree with it being diseased. That's a reason. But I just wondered if there is any possibility of planting. I know it says that there's insufficient room to plant on the highway verge. But are we in a position where we can put a replacement somewhere else? I don't like to see TPOs being taken down if we're not replacing them somewhere else. Could I ask that question? Thanks.
Mr. Shaw, are you able to?
The replacement on the verge was considered, and the reason it wasn't progressed was that there's insufficient room. The visibility splay on this road is 120 metres either side, and it was considered that planting a new tree would start to interfere with the visibility splay for not only this resident but other residents as well. In addition, there are services like water and electricity in the verge, so it would be difficult to find a safe place to plant a replacement tree in this situation. And the law, the Act says that a tree should be planted near where the tree is being removed, and that's the reason why there was not a request, a determination to plant a replacement oak tree.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know this road, but looking at it on the pictures, it seems like there are a lot of trees along that road. It says in the report that it's not going to set a precedent, but I think it will do. And I think we'll be looking at chopping others down as well at the same time. And I'm not a tree specialist, but you've only got to go up Bradgate and look at the trees up there, and some of them have had holes in them for hundreds of years, and they're oak trees, and they tend to last for a long while. So I'm not sure that the fact that it's diseased is going to fetch an oak tree down. I can understand why the guy has got a problem with his visibility, but according to the report, he's only just moved in there, so he must have known about that when he bought the property. But I just wonder whether we're going to be sat here looking at some more trees coming down on that road, Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Shaw, if you could.
Thank you. Let me just move on to that's a picture of the TPO. As you can see, the dotted line is the order there, and that's 1949 order. And there's the four properties on the Rowcliffe Road, with properties on the other side. And that is looking west up to the Rowcliffe crossroads there. And these trees on the southern side of the road are subject to the 1949 order. As far as I'm aware, the trees on the other side of the road are not subject to protection. So, with regard to any application that we get for works to or felling trees, each one is considered on its merits, with the main issue is the loss of enjoyment of the applicant due to the tree, versus the loss of enjoyment of amenity of the public. And that is, it's that balance between those two factors that in each decision that the county council makes is what is taken into consideration, and that unlike planning, the issue of precedent is not such a major issue as it would be, say, in a planning application for development of a building. It's more a regulatory matter than it is strictly a planning matter, though trees obviously are part of the planning system. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Bolter.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, interesting case. If it's planted on the highway, is it a highway tree owned by the county council, or is it owned by the actual resident? First question. The second one is, according to the photograph, it's quite large gardens. So I can't see why we can't plant a tree within the garden area. Doesn't have to be on the highway. I think the Act says near. Well, you can plant it the other side, the edge line. So, that's a possibility. The other thing is, if we were to refuse the officer's recommendation to fell, an accident did happen, how would we end up as members?
Are you able to answer the former? I don't think you'll be able to answer the latter.
After the third, Chairman.
Sorry?
After the third.
Yes, I thought you perhaps would. Yes. Would you want to deal with the first ones first?
So I just go through the inquiry about replanting. The tree must be, if we are determining that conditioning a planting of a replacement tree, it must be visible to the public. So it would have to be within the front garden. It couldn't be in the back garden.
It could be, Chair.
But it wouldn't be visible to the public.
It would eventually.
Yes, but we have to. All these conditions could be subject to the applicant challenging the whether he would or not, I don't know. We could request it as a voluntary replacement, either in his front garden or in his back garden, if we so wish, but it would be purely voluntary, and that would be for him to sort of make that decision. And what was the other thing?
Well, is it a highway tree?
Is it a highway tree? It is a highway tree, and that we manage it.
Why is
the county.
You've got an application in to fell a highway tree?
Because it's affecting his access from his property, and we have a duty under the Highways Act to maintain the safety of the highway.
Okay. What was the previous owner?
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Cross.
So, members, you don't need to be worried at all about any liability with regard to decision making, because you just make decisions on the basis of officer recommendations. Were there to be any issue with regard to any accident, what would happen would depend very much on what the facts of the accident were, whether any claim was made, against the county council as highway authority. Any accidents relate to highways issues, so it would be a highways claim. We carry insurance. We have a very good track record with regard to defending highways claims. So really the bottom line is you're not to be concerned at all about any decisions you make might make you liable. There would be no personal liability to any members. Thank you, Chairman.
David Jennings.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The point's already been picked up, which I was going to raise, a voluntary replacement tree. I understand what the officers are saying, that the tree has a limited life, it's got to go, and I regret that, but I'm afraid it's the only solution we can make this afternoon. I would not like to see a replacement tree in the highway for obvious reasons. But what we could ask, and I realise we can do no more than that, is for the applicant, if we approve this, to voluntarily donate a tree to Charnwood Borough Council or the County Council to be planted in a place of our choosing, or their choosing. And if we can add that, Chairman, I'm quite happy to move the recommendations to approve the removal of the tree.
Okay. Is there a second? Second.
Hold it, Chairman.
Second that, Chairman.
Hold it.
Thank you, Bill. Tony, go on.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to move, but Mr. Jennings beat me to it. But yeah, I'm happy to support the recommendations, and also echo the comments by Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Cross, you wanted to?
Yes, without wanting to be unduly difficult or obstructive, be very careful with regard to the powers that you've got. And Mr. Shaw's explained what you can and sort of can't do, and anything that has to be required would have to be of a voluntary sort of nature, and as long as you're very, very clear that it would be open to the applicant here to say, well, thanks but no thanks, then I'm less concerned. But if there's any feeling that this is something to almost force the applicant to do when he can't be made to do this, then I want members to be clear that there's only a limit to how far you can go. My preference would be, on something like this, that it's more appropriate to more of a note to applicant rather than this can't be conditioned or anything of that nature, as I'm sure you appreciate. But that would be the way to deal with it. But it must be made clear that if the applicant said, well, I'm not going to do that, there would be no recompense.
Are you okay with that flexibility?
We have done this before. We've made a voluntary request for a replacement tree, and the applicant can say yes, they can say no. But I think it is worthwhile putting the question. But it is purely of a voluntary nature. We've got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Mr. Cross, are you?
I just wanted members to be, so especially got one or two new members at the committee that have to take these things carefully. You can only act within the powers. The act's sort of quite clear. Yes, as Mr. Bolt says, there is what we might call some legal wriggle room, but I didn't want members to be thinking that this is an absolute requirement and this would force something to happen. I'm quite clear that you understand that, but I wanted just it to be on the record. So I'm quite happy with what's being proposed. Thank you.
Sure, if we're all clear, that's fine. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've probably been a bit harsh here, but the report's quite contradictory. I mean, it says best part of 50 to 80 years have coexisted, man, tree and vehicle in this area. I mean, it is on the verge, but it is set back a few feet, and if there had been a significant problem with highways, I think they would have already brought it to our attention by now. So it's quite specific to the site. And yet, when we saw the photos, if they can come back up, please, bottom left, you can clearly see two cars in the adjacent property. And their visibility to the left, if we're to be believed, must be difficult as well then. And yet we've heard nothing from them about visibility displays and worrying about exiting. We've got a new resident who's come in and found an issue, like somebody said earlier, without checking really what the lay of the land is. And I have little or no sympathy for that view. I think buyer beware. If there's a problem, you pick it up before you sign the documents. I tend to agree with the planning officer at Charnwood Borough Council. They must have a very long front of a car where they can't actually see, because if you look at the bottom left picture, you can see several feet that tree is set back. Any careful driver coming out of either this side or the other side has managed perfectly well for the past 50, 80 years. So, and Mr. Shaw's comment that it's causing considerable loss of enjoyment, I think is something of an over-exaggeration. So I won't be supporting the application.
Thank you, Michael. Any further comments? It's been proposed and seconded that we grant permission to fell this tree. Could we have a vote on it, please? Those in favour of it? And those against? Well, it's considerably more in favour to fell the tree, so permission is granted. Thank you. With the request, as David Jennings outlined. Okay, agenda item number 8, which is a variation of existing conditions for quarry. This is being done by Amelia Lees. So Amelia, would you present the application, please?
So there are two applications being decided here. One is for the proposed importation and stockpiling of clay at Shepshed Quarry, and one is for the variation of existing conditions of the current planning permission to amend the working scheme, the restoration scheme, and to increase the permitted number of lorry movements. So the site is located just to the west of the M1, south of the A512. And here, closer here, you can see the red line is the working area which the applications refer to, and just to the north is the associated brickworks, which is linked to the quarry via a conveyor belt which runs under the road. So just to explain the current situation, the quarry is currently active, extracting clay to the south of the site on a campaign basis and stockpiling just north of the extraction area. And here are some photos just of the current extraction area as it stands presently and what the clay stockpiles look like just north of it. So the first proposal for the importation of clay would come in through the existing site access, approximately 5,000 tonnes per annum from Heather Quarry, which leads on to the variation of the existing conditions to amend the limit on lorry numbers from 10 movements a day, so that's 5 in, 5 out, to 100 movements a day, so that's 50 movements in, 50 movements out, to allow this importation to occur annually. And this also will go hand in hand with blending clay from the current working area and the changes in the phasing scheme. So it's proposed to continue extraction in the current working area down to design depth, moving northwards up along the eastern boundary into a final phase. So this will take place on a phasing basis, restoring each phase behind up to a lower level restoration scheme, and it is considered that this change to a lower level restoration scheme will mean that each phase will get restored faster than previously, as the existing permission requires the applicant to restore to original ground levels. So this proposed restoration scheme, which is to neutral grassland in the centre of the body of the site and to the eastern field back to agricultural land. There have been no objections in this application, but concerns were raised from a local resident regarding surface water drainage and just the site maintaining the ditches and the proposed swales.
Yeah, thank you, Amelia. Thank you for your presentation. We do have a speaker on this item, Mr. Chris Loden, Technical Director, SLR Consulting. Mr. Loden, are you here? Yes. Yeah. Would you like to just sit over there, please? You've been allotted 4 minutes to speak. Once you've finished speaking, if you would just remain there to see if there is any council that needs clarification on anything you said, not on the application, on anything you said today. So, with that, if you'd like to begin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. As I said, my name's Chris Lode and I work for SLR Consulting Limited, and I've been instructed by the applicant in the matter of the applications before you. The Chalmer Brickworks, although a small operation, is an important supplier of both clay bricks and terracotta products to the construction sector. Unlike other brickworks in the county, it supplies specialist products to niche markets, with products being manufactured by hand as opposed to mass production through automated means. The brickwork supports the employment of 51 staff, a large number of whom are drawn from the local area. In addition, like other businesses, the brickwork supports the local economy through the services it procures. In order to continue manufacturing bricks and clay products, it is important to have a secure supply of raw materials, and in this case clay. Traditionally, materials have been supplied from Shepshire Quarry and transferred to the brickworks via a conveyor system. Following re-evaluation of the quarry, it became apparent that there are still viable and workable reserves, but not enough to support the brickworks for around 10 years, but only enough to support the brickworks for around 10 years. Having considered other clay resources in the county, the reserve at Heather Quarry is the closest match to those found at Shepshire. Importing clay from Heather for blending, which is not an uncommon practice at brickworks, allows the reserve at Shepshire Quarry to be husbanded, securing the long-term future for the brickworks. The importation of clay would result in HGV movements into and out of the quarry, but only for a couple of weeks a year. Blended clay would still be transferred to the brickworks via the conveyor system. The changes proposed to the working scheme are similar to those previously approved by the Council in 2014 and fundamentally seek to restore the workings to a lower level, reducing the amount of fill needed to create the landform. In turn, this reduces the number of HGV movements needed over the life of the development. Consideration has been given to the possible environmental effects of the proposals, both by SLR and by the Council's officers and consultees in determining the planning applications. For each facet of the environment, no significant effect has been identified, and where needed, environmental protection can be secured through the imposition of planning conditions. It is important to note that no objections have been raised against either of the planning applications, be it from technical consultees or the local community. It is noted that some concerns, many relating to drainage, have been raised by the local community. The imposition of planning conditions will address these concerns. Finally, the applications have been found to be compliant with the development plan and national policy, complying with the government's aims of sustainable development. I would therefore close by commending the planning officer over the preparation of the report, at the conclusions of which we fully support and agree with. We would therefore respectfully ask members to support their officer and grant planning permission. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Loden.
Yes, thanks. You said in your presentation that the importation of clay would be over a couple of weeks. When you say couple, and I'll ride at this with, I used to live in South Africa, and the phrase couple used to mean more than two. So exactly what number of weeks are you referring to? Thanks.
Okay, I do mean 2 weeks.
David Jennings.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Before the meeting, I saw Mrs. Radford, the local member, who asked me to apologise to members. She couldn't join us this afternoon, but asked me to make it known that she did not object to the proposals. So I've done what she asked me, Chairman.
Michael.
Move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Loden. Yes, David Jennings is right. Mrs. Radford hasn't got any particular issues. She has made a comment which is stated on paragraph 51, which she asks that the on-site ditches are kept clear and water levels of proposed lagoon is kept at appropriate level by means of a pump. Is that something that can be dealt
with? Yes, Chairman, there is a condition proposed to to cover that. In fact, we're asking for a sort of a review of all the drainage on there, so we're very clear about what the drainage position is. So we're asking that as part of the planning conditions.
Yeah. Thank you, Lonnie. Well, that seems to satisfy Mrs. Radford. So, Mrs. Taylor, could you put
Thank
your light
you.
off, Mr. Premise? That's it.
Just a query, really. On page 21, just talking about the HGV movements increasing from 10 movements a day to 100, but they're saying that the importation of the clay will only be a single week-long campaign, or 2 weeks, if we've just heard. But on the conditions in the appendix on page 35, it's allowing those movements to happen every day of the year. Do we really need to allow them to have that amount of vehicle movements every day, or can we limit them to the 2 weeks of a year that they have those additional movements just to import the clay? I just think going on till 2041 with that amount of movements, when they're really only saying that it's going to happen for a couple of weeks a year, thinking of the traffic that in the future rather than just now, is that really necessary to allow them those movements every single day?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to address that. Well, I think there are two things here. One is that I think it's also going to cover importation of inert waste as well as the clay. So that increase will cover what's required to restore the site, which could happen any time during the year, and it could happen in a campaign way as well, depending on where the source of inert waste comes from. It could be from a construction site, which they need to bring in. Secondly, I'm not sure whether there is a specific time of year that they do it. I'm sure they do it in a particular window. Whether we can actually clarify that to a precise extent, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, what you've got to ask yourself is that, is there a problem in allowing 100 vehicle movements per day? And you see from the Highway Authority there isn't a problem. So what is the reason to restrict it if the 100 vehicles per day isn't a problem? I understand the issue about the future proofing, but this is what's before us. This is what you've been asked to do. Highway Authority have no objections. There are 15,000 vehicle movements on that road per day at the moment. So I think this is a marginal increase, and hence the recommendation, Chair.
Yeah, okay with that, Mrs. Taylor?
My point was really for future proofing, but you're saying we can't. But this permission is up till 2041, isn't it? So am I not to consider that future vehicle movements up to 2041 just movements as it is today?
It's something we do have to look at, but I have no advice from the Highway Authority that says that's going to be a problem in the future. So without that sort of advice or worry from the Highway Authority, I'm not in a position to say, well, you know, that is an issue. Members may want to do that if they got good reasons to know what the future growth will be. But at this moment in time, it's not normal practice to do that. But in any event, mineral permissions do have a review system which is different to ordinary planning permissions, is that we are capable of reviewing this every 15 years. I know it's not far from the 20-odd years since to 2041, 2042, but there is a mechanism which allows a review of mineral permissions after 15 years.
You okay with that, Mr. Taylor?
Sort of. I'm still a bit concerned that we're allowing them that amount of vehicle movements when that's not really what they need. And I wasn't sort of saying it's got to be specific days of the year, but allowing them half the year, 26 weeks, to have those amounts of vehicle movements might be just to contain it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Mrs. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just have clarification? We're talking about the movement of the clay over what is now 2 weeks, but are you also saying that on top of that there's inert waste movement?
Chairman, the proposal includes both the clay import and the import of waste, which all be contained within the vehicle movements proposed.
Mr. Bolter.
Thank you. Yes, we're going from 10 to 100 vehicles. At the moment, we've got wheel washing on site for the 10 vehicles. I just wonder about the capacity. To reach 100 vehicles, how are we going to wash the vehicle wheels for 100 vehicles if it's got the same equipment? Is it achievable? Because we don't want vehicles going onto the highway with mud all over the wheels.
Sorry, Chair. It's not vehicle number. It's vehicle movements. It's not the number of vehicles.
It looks like we've got two Lonix.
Yeah, Chairman, if I could help members. As part of these proposals, there is a specific request to vary the wheel washing conditions, which they've updated the requirements, and there is a condition here which requires those to be implemented, which will update the facilities to accommodate what is being proposed.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we grant permission for this. Could we now take a vote on it? Those in favour of the proposition? Well, that looks to be unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9, which is delegated decisions. There are 3 pages of those. Is anyone any comments or questions on those items? Yeah. Okay. Agenda item 10 is much the same, but with tree preservation orders. Yeah. It's moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Item 10. No, we've just done item 10. Item 11. Any other items the chairman has decided to take as urgent? Well, there's nothing to do with that. And chairman's announcements is thank you very much for coming, and we'll close the meeting. Thank you.